The last time we talked about Russian drones crossing into NATO airspace, it was in reference to Poland. Now, this was not the first time that it happened, but it was the largest time. 19 drones crossed into Polish airspace, not only drones crossing over from Ukrainian airspace into Poland, but also drones crossing from Belarusian airspace into Poland. This is what led the Polish government to believe that this was not done on accident, but that pathway indicated that it was done on purpose, for either the purpose of probing or whatever the Russians are trying to do. But to test Polish air defense systems, test NATO response times. At the end of the day, a $10,000 decoy drone being shot down by a $2.8 million NATO missile, which is what happened when these drones were intercepted. The defense economics works and is a pretty cheap way to test the airspace. And that's what they did. They had drones crash near Kaliningrad to the north, and they had drones crash to the south of Warsaw, Poland's capital. This was not the first time that there was a spillover, but it was certainly the largest, and the first time that the Polish government indicated that they believed it was deliberate. And by indicating that it was deliberate and not a mistake, that creates a crisis. Because if it's a mistake, you can continue to operate under the hope that it won't happen again, even if they could get some information about probing or air defenses from that one mistake. But if it was on purpose, that means they could do it again and continue to probe defenses and learn a lot about NATO air defenses, Polish airspace, and also, who knows, maybe one time a bunch of drones spill over and they accidentally hit an arms factory. An arms factory that's providing weapons to Ukraine and is worth hundreds of $1 million in infrastructure and investments. Now, Romania has come out after the Trump administration responded by saying maybe it was a mistake. Now, I said at the time, this was a terrible idea. There were already close calls in Romania. There was already multiple spillovers in Poland. And that by indicating that the administration posts 19 Russian drones moving into Poland would just say maybe it's a mistake, then the Russians would take advantage. That they would say, oh, yes, it's a mistake. And they would follow up. They would see what they can get away with. They would push it to its limit and then back off once they found it. Knowing what they can get away with, knowing what they can't get away with. And by not putting some red lines in the sand and not clearly responding forcefully, this invites further provocation. It invites further drone attacks, and it invites a possible spiral. Because what happens when a drone actually ends somebody's life in Poland? How is the Polish government supposed to respond? What will the Polish public call for? What happens if that occurs in Romania? Which is the update to the story. Romania reports that Russian drones entered its airspace. Now, I've talked about close calls in the past where these drones have gotten very close to the Romanian border. But in this case, a Russian drone entered Romanian airspace, flew around in Romanian airspace. NATO jets, Romanian jets were scrambled to intercept these Russian drones, and then the Russian drone flew in airspace. It's almost being like escorted by these jets as it slowly flew around and then went back to Ukraine and attacked it from behind. Let me read you a little bit from this article. In a statement, Romanian Defense Ministry said it detected the Russian drone when two F-16 jets were monitoring the country's border with Ukraine after Russian air attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure on the Danube. Romania had also summoned the Russian ambassador to Bucharest's foreign ministry. The drone was identified as a Goran, the Russian name for an Iranian-designed Shahed-136, which is used by Russia both for attacks on Ukraine and surveillance. It was detected 20 kilometers southwest of the village of Chilevenche before disappearing from the radar. But it did not fly over populated areas or pose imminent danger, the ministry said. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kara Kallas, called the incident yet another unacceptable breach of the EU member states' sovereignty. So, one second. Let me read you this next line. I've talked about this before, but it's bizarre to read out loud. Under a new Romanian law passed this summer, the pilots were authorized to shoot the Russian drone down, but decided not to. So under Romanian law, they could have shot down that Russian drone, but they decided not to. The defense ministry said, and I quote, this is very important, assess the collateral risks and decided not to open fire. The statement came after the Air Force was criticized in Romanian media for not shooting the drone down. So this could indicate that a Russian drone can enter Romanian airspace and then use Romanian airspace to come around and attack Ukraine, because that's what it did. It flew around and flew back into Ukraine, and expect not to be shot down as long as they pose a larger risk to Ukraine than they do the Romanians. If they can indicate that their goal is just to use Romanian airspace to fly around and maybe attack Ukraine from behind, and they don't pose a risk to the Romanians, then maybe they don't need to intercept them. It's a risky standard to set. It's a risky message to send. If there's any unmanned drone in your airspace, you should probably shoot it down, especially if the Romanian Ministry of Defense is saying that it only flew over unpopulated areas. What was the risk of collateral damage if the areas it flew in order to, tame down the situation was described as unpopulated? What is the collateral damage under unpopulated areas? Could this lead to the Russians using Romanian airspace again in the future? Well, I don't know if they're going to send 30 drones to Romania, turn around. I think at a certain point, there would be, the Romanians don't exactly know their intentions and they have to be careful, but the Russians are testing what they can get away with. And the more they get away with, the more they will test. And this wasn't the end of it. Zelenskyy responded to it. Romania scrambled combat aircraft because of a Russian drone in its airspace. According to current data, the drone penetrated about 10 kilometers into Romanian territory and operated in NATO airspace for around 50 minutes, almost an hour. Also today, Poland responded militarily to the threat of Russian drone attacks. In fact, Russian drones have been in different regions of Ukraine all day, including northern regions, practically along the border with Belarus. According to preliminary information, Belarusian airspace was also used for entry into Ukraine's airspace towards Volyn. The Russian military knows exactly where their drones are headed and how long they can operate in the air. Their routes are always calculated. This cannot be a coincidence, a mistake, or the initiative of some lower-level commanders. It is an obvious expansion of the war by Russia, and this is exactly how they act. Small steps at first and eventually big losses. This is why actions must always be preventative, based on the principles that there are no minor military threats from those who are accustomed to destroying the independence and lives of others. Russia is accustomed to this, and there must be consequences. Sanctions against Russia are needed. Tariffs against Russian trade are needed. Collective defense is needed. And Ukraine has proposed to its partners the creation of just such a system of protection. Do not wait for dozens of Shaheeds and ballistic missiles before finally making a decision. Now, whether or not every single one of these were purposeful, I do not know. It is possible that a Shahed runs out of fuel and then, just glides to a destination. It's not impossible that I could see the Russians making a mistake, but these many mistakes I find basically impossible to believe, especially when going through Belarusian airspace, not even entering Ukrainian airspace, as was the case with the Polish example from before. Now, Romania condemned it. They said it was bad. They said it was irresponsible for what Moscow did in entering its airspace. But again, a physical action taken against these drones would probably send a larger message. Then again, Poland did shoot down a drone last time when those 19 drones were thrown into Poland. And guess what happened today? Literally today, in the morning, what happened here in Poland? Poland neutralized a drone over a government building in Warsaw. Security officers have neutralized a drone over government buildings in central Warsaw, and 2 Belarusian citizens have been detained, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said on Monday, amid heightened regional tensions following recent airspace violations. The state security services neutralized a drone operating over a government building. 2 citizens of Belarus have been arrested. Police are investigating. The citizens of Belarus were identified, targeted, and taken into custody by our officers. The same spokesperson told Polish State News Agency, PAP, that no shots had been fired. He added that the drone had returned to its operators in emergency mode and had been secured by officers. The incident came with Poland after an alert of, the incident comes with Poland on alert after a wave of Russian drones entered Polish airspace. Those violations saw Western jets downing Russian targets for the first time during the conflict and stoked fresh fears in the region that has been on edge since Moscow unleashed war in 2022. Tusk warned at the time that the violations were the closest we have been to open conflict since World War II. Poraska Street in the Polish capital, the site of Wednesday's incident, lies in a district that houses government buildings, the Beldower Palace, and foreign embassies. The Russian embassy is also nearby. The area is designated as a no-fly zone for drones unless operators secure a permit, and violators are punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Here is the area that there is a no-drone zone where they operated. A deputy interior minister said the incident showed the government's security services and the interior ministry were working to secure the country's most important government premises. This shows that Poland is safe. So these masses of drones are crossing the border. We have another drone violation now in Romania, where the Romanians, with the now new legal authority, it's crazy they had to pass a law for this, by the way, but now with the new legal authority to shoot down drones, deciding not to as a re-entering Russian airspace, Ukrainian airspace. Now we have not FPV, but quadcopter drone operators in the Polish capital monitoring government buildings with drones. This is a bad time to be caught doing this. This is a really bad time for tensions to be caught doing this. And with all of this perfect storm of violations, it led to the Polish government releasing a statement, specifically the Polish prime minister, which we have to read. Here it is. Oh, sorry, I said prime minister. This is the foreign minister, Radosław Sikorski. Technically, we can do it, but it must be a joint decision with allies. So this is a statement from the Polish foreign minister, where he essentially opens the conversation for a no-fly zone over Ukraine, suggesting NATO and the European Union intercept Russian drones and missiles before they reach Allied airspace. And I quote, "Technically, we can do it, but it must be a joint decision with allies." He also then proposed a maritime control zone in the North Sea to monitor Russia's shadow fleet that's entering the Baltic. These are basically like improperly labeled like shipping containers, like cargo ships that are moving Russian product under the radar. Warning of a potential environmental disaster if one of those tankers sink. Okay. I have never heard the Polish foreign minister go as so far to call for a no-fly zone in Ukraine. If this was to happen, which, of course, that would be a very big move by NATO to do this. Of course, the Hungarians and the Slovaks would probably object since the drones aren't in their airspace, and we know how Fico and Viktor Orban stand on the matter. But if this was to happen, whether it was an individual, like unilateral country initiative, like Poland and France and Germany all agreed to do it, in the UK, but it's not necessarily a NATO-wide mission, or it is a NATO-wide mission, how it would probably work is that Western Ukrainian regions like Volyn would probably have NATO air patrols that would patrol around the area, waiting for Russian drones to enter that airspace. And once they do, before it could even risk spilling over into Poland, risk spilling over into Romania, risk spilling over anywhere, they would be able to take it down. Now, this would also have the added side benefit of whatever infrastructure or investments that the Ukrainians make in Western Ukraine would be under more air protection than the rest of Ukraine. So it would make it an area where you could maybe store more ammunition, build more factories, and the Ukrainians could utilize it to concentrate different both humanitarian and military efforts in the parts of the country that would fall under this air defense. And you should expect them to. This would be nobody but Russia's fault. Russia shouldn't have invaded Ukraine in the first place. Russia shouldn't be bombing Ukraine in the first place. But if Russia is going to invade Ukraine, if Russia is going to bomb Ukraine, what you expect every nation state to do is to control their fire if you expect people not to get involved and you're going to complain about Europe saying we feel threatened by Russian action, we think that our territory is threatened, we think that the sovereignty of states in Europe is threatened, we think that peace in our time in Europe is threatened, we don't like that you started the largest war in Europe since World War II, and they're complaining about the threat of Russian aggression. If you have drones entering their airspace, that's just going to justify their concerns. And they're going to take decisions, they're going to take actions to protect themselves. No country should have to just live with, well, Russia's bombing Ukraine, so sometimes we get bombed. Well, Russia's bombing Ukraine, so sometimes a drone's going to hit one of our village houses, or a drone's going to spill over and hit near our capital, or hit near our country's north, or might be 1 or 2 drones, might be nearly 20 drones, just depends on the day and the afternoon. No country lives like this. If this happened in the United States, our response would be to take out 10 times what they hit of ours. That's what we did in Iraq when our bases were attacked. We attacked the militias that fired at our base. We're going to take out 20 of your guys if you injure one of ours. That's the way the United States operated under Joe Biden. That's the way the United States operated under Donald Trump. It establishes a deterrence. It makes you know that if you punch us, we're going to punch you 10 times harder. So if you spill over drones, we're not even talking about punching back. We're not talking about Poland taking 19 drones and flying them into Russia and having them hit wherever. We're not talking about the Romanians throwing some drones over. We're not talking about, by the way, the Lithuanians. Lithuania suspects its defense ministry could have concealed fact of Russian drone incursions. Saulius Sikvolis, former speaker of Lithuania's parliament, has stated that the Committee on National Security and Defense will soon investigate whether Russian drones violated Lithuanian airspace. At the same time, dozens entered Poland. If this type of stuff's happening, they're not even talking about striking back. They're not talking about, hey, let's counter fire. Let's throw 19 drones into Russia. They're just talking about making sure that their citizens are safe from the war that they're not directly participating in. And Russia keeps advocating they don't directly participate in, saying it's not their business, you don't have anything to fear, but that their drones spill over into Polish airspace. It spilled over into Polish airspace. It spilled over into Romanian airspace. There's now questions of whether it spilled over into Lithuanian airspace. And if the president of the United States responds every time, as the Polish foreign ministry is talking about getting NATO jets and putting them in Ukraine right now, the first time ever we have the Polish foreign ministry saying we need a no-fly zone because we cannot stop Russian drones from hitting Poland, a NATO country. Tensions are rapidly increasing, and the president of the United States is paying it no mind. The media isn't giving it the headlines it deserves because there's other big stories going on right now. 19 Russian drones crash into Poland, the largest air attack on Poland since World War II, and it's barely on page 3. That's terrifying. And so you cannot be surprised when these countries take individual initiatives to put their air force in Ukraine and stop it before it's going to hit their country. And I don't want to hear, oh, it's an escalation. If you are not at war with Poland, you should not bomb Poland. Period. End of paragraph. Them taking the forward initiative to make sure their drones don't come into their country, that's what any government should do to defend their own people. And if it has the side benefit of also protecting the Ukrainians, good. Shouldn't have bombed Poland. Again, the fact we have the Polish prime minister right now saying that they're the closest point of conflict since World War II, and these types of incidents are not happening, every once in a while. They're happening every week. Until the president of the United States takes the security threat seriously, he risks expanding the war, let alone trying to end it. I do foreign policy coverage. I'm in Poland right now. Isn't that convenient? And I'm going to Ukraine very soon. I appreciate a follow.